Welcome to the very first edition of the Plan Well podcast with your host, owner and attorney at Cary Estate Planning, Paul Yokovitis.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Yokovitis. Welcome to the Plan Well podcast. I think it's important to let you know today's date. I want to timestamp or date stamp this podcast episode because it's very relevant to what's happening right now. And so if you're listening to this today, great. If you're listening to it a month or 2 months or a year later, it's going to be relevant to the context of how this is being recorded and how you're receiving it. And obviously things change and the law changes and all these executive orders are changing. And so today we're going to talk about COVID-19, estate planning, and all of these, things that have changed in our, strange times currently. First and foremost, obviously, we're recording this on April 28th, and today there's actually a piece of legislation before the North Carolina legislature, which could potentially provide for the ability for e-signing of wills and numerous other documents that require notary and witness attestation. But I want to talk first about, how things have changed over the last couple of months. Obviously, in North Carolina, and more specifically in Wake County, we had our first confirmed COVID case on Super Tuesday, March 3rd. I remember I was at the voting line at Westlake Middle School when I started hearing, some talk about the fact that the news was reporting a confirmed case of COVID in Wake County. It seemed like it was somebody who had traveled to Seattle, which at that point was a hotbed and really was the only, hot area in the country. And they had brought the infection to North Carolina. But at that point, nothing had changed. Everything was very much the same. People were a little bit more anxious about our new, circumstances, but didn't really know what it meant. We didn't have any stay-at-home orders at that point. There wasn't widespread community infection or anything like that. And so you largely were carrying on as normal. And that's because life was still normal. And so things have changed pretty dramatically in the almost 2 months since. But I wanted to talk first and foremost, what that has looked like from an estate planning standpoint. We'll talk about the steps that we've taken at Cary Estate Planning to make things more safe, to make things more available and less intimidating and still accessible during this new, strange times that we're in. And then we'll talk about, what this e-notary and e-witness statute could end up doing for us and for North Carolina and our clients, and what we expect, when we get back to normal here and in estate planning generally. And so, the big thing is we're still operating largely as we did previously. The exception to that is, we're having video consultations and video review meetings and video follow-ups. And that's something that we traditionally had not been very available to. We always have and always will prefer in-person meetings, but the logistics of that is just very different now. Certainly, first and foremost, we are an essential business, but under Governor Cooper's executive order. But that doesn't mean that we have to still conduct business as normal, because it's not normal right now. Everything is very different because of the social distancing and the potential for infection and those sort of things. So we want to be first and foremost very cognizant of the safety of our clients, potential clients, our team members, our families, to make sure that we're not putting anybody unnecessarily at risk of infection. And certainly the scary part of all of this is we don't know who is and isn't infected until we have widespread testing and tracing. And so what we've done now, and this will likely remain, forever, is we've utilized a platform called Zoom to be able to reach out and connect with clients and potential clients on a personal level, just, over video. And so it's definitely not the same. It's not a equal substitute for an in-person meeting, but in this new reality of ours, it's the best we can do. Most, if not all of our, our initial meetings or follow-up meetings are being conducted on Zoom. Some of them via phone call if clients are not comfortable with Zoom, with the app or how it works. And so we're pretty amenable to flexibility in that respect. Whatever the client prefers is what we'll do, but it's still helping. It's still allowing people to take that first step, because planning is still incredibly important. It's probably more important than it's ever been, because this new COVID reality it includes, or it forces just the reality that things, it's a level of urgency, right? Because COVID does not discriminate. So it's something that no one knows, who's going to be infected next and what that infection will look like for you. And so the level of urgency really skyrocketed in March. And so we were probably busier than we've ever been in March. And once the stay home order went into place, things came kind of back to normal, as far as, call traffic, search traffic, things sort of slowed down a little bit, as far as, and not really slowing, but relative to March when the demand was through the roof, it just went kind of back to normal rates. We had the same sorts of numbers of initial meetings and website leads and those sort of things as we would have in February or January. And so people, I think the urgency and the anxiety started to quell a little bit, and a sense of potential safety was starting to be reached. And I think that's because people started to see that social distancing and staying home was starting to work. And I think at this point in North Carolina, we're starting to see a flattening of the curve, if not a reduction, maybe in the next few days or week. And so there's a sense of safety that I think is sort of instilled in that, and that we've gotten to a place of calm, that it's not so scary, or not as scary as it was last month. And of course, we heard last week that the stay home order was going to be extended for another week or so till May 8th, which doesn't really move the needle that much for most people. Obviously, for businesses that are continuing to remain closed because of this order, it's probably devastating and substantial. But for people who are staying home, the personal aspects or individual aspects of that, it maybe not or maybe didn't change much for people. But I think the more significant step is that, along with or soon thereafter the extension of the executive order, we saw the plans put in place for an eventual return to an open economy. And it's, I think, surprised people that it may take numerous weeks to get to a point where we're back to some semblance of normalcy. But I think the honest truth is that our normal is really going to be changed forever, and we may resume, obviously, an open economy where we can go to the restaurants and concerts and comedy venues and that kind of thing. But I don't know that anybody's going to go back to, or that the world is going to go back to the way it was in January and February, or even further back than that. Just knowing what we know now, it's just a very different time, and I think that that's going to have lasting impacts on the way that we function as a society and the way that our culture is. And so we have instituted numerous changes, to the way that we conduct business, specifically in the personal interactions with our clients and potential clients. Like we, for instance, used to do usually 4 workshops every month. We used to do them in person at, Cary Senior Center, Apex Community Center, just local municipal buildings that were gracious hosts for us. And we used to fill the room very regularly, sometimes 40, 50 people, at pretty much every time we did these workshops. And so we actually had 4 scheduled in March, right in the middle of the month. And unfortunately, the COVID really started to peak around that time, or at least the community spread was starting to be a thing. And so the day before our first of 4 at Cary Senior Center, Cary Senior Center actually closed until further notice, kind of thing, like TBD. And so those 4 were canceled. We had to move them to Facebook Live. And that was largely because we were sort of trying to figure out what an online seminar workshop would look like and what would be the best software to use. And so in March, we basically had a private Facebook group that we invited everyone who RSVP'd. We had well over 100 people who had signed up for these 4 workshops who were now, still interested. Their interest level did not go anywhere. If anything, it probably went up. But we quickly reached out to everybody, invited them to a private Facebook group, and most, if not all of them, joined that private Facebook group. And then I, on the same days and times that the workshops had already been scheduled, went and did a Facebook Live broadcast in the group, and it went great. It's a medium that we knew clients or those attendees would be comfortable with, because that's how they found us. And we had really great feedback. It was very accessible, and people felt safe in that they could stay home and still engage in and benefit from this information. And so it sort of showed us a new possibility of teaching the public and being accessible to the public for this sort of estate planning information. And so when April came around, we had already booked out Cary Senior Center for 3 months. We had 4 days in March, April, and May, and all 3 months obviously have been canceled for in-person meetings. Obviously. But so we started pivoting and seeing, okay, what's going to be a viable long-term software solution for us to do online webinars instead of in-person workshops? And it's not that we're never going to return to in-person workshops. It's that, we have found now that people are opting in or signing up for webinars at the same rate, if not more, than in-person workshops, that we're actually seeing a higher show-up rate, that we're seeing a higher engagement rate. And so it may just be a more effective medium to have things on a webinar format. Now, we kind of have to wait a little while and still continue to test that theory, because we're still at the very beginning of this. If July comes around, people may, if we're sort of back to some semblance of normalcy in July, people may say, well, I want to get back out and get into the community and see, in-person workshops. And so we'll probably continue to offer both as long as it's feasible. Right now, we're not doing in-person at all, obviously, because we can't, and it wouldn't be safe. It wouldn't be responsible to do that. But maybe in the future, we'll maybe cut back on the number of in-person workshops that we do and increase the number of online webinars that we do. And it's just one of those things where you got to test it and iterate, and that's what we plan on doing. And so the big thing is it's instilled this new reality has sort of forced us to reevaluate the way that we do business generally, right? Right before, COVID struck in Wake County, literally the day before Super Tuesday, we opened our Cary office, which is where I am today. And so that was a big investment on our part, and it's paid off substantially because we have a home base, a headquarters that's ours and that we have full control over. And, we've got sufficient room to grow, and we're already, it's 2,000 feet. And we're already getting to the point where we need to start kind of consolidating things, because we've also grown as a team this year. And so, the big thing is, moving forward, we've realized that it's a lot less important that people, if they're only doing work and not in-person meetings, that they can do that from home very easily. And we had already had that ability. It's not like that's a new concept for us, but it's really changed the way that we conceive or conceptualize our office generally. We purposely, got an office with 3 conference rooms because we anticipated the need to fill all 3 at the same time because of the number of clients that we help. But right now, we're only using one of them, and it's primarily, we're using 2 of them. One is to help conduct signings, where our team, it's a glass conference room. So we're using the glass conference room to be able to look through the glass, to be able to witness our clients sign their documents in our reception area. The other is basically a launch pad for all of the signings for the day, because what we're doing right now is Mondays, we're stacking up, 11, 12 signings for the day in about a 5-hour time frame. It's usually a couple hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. And so we basically prep all, 11 or 12 of these plans ahead of time, usually the Friday before, and we have them basically all laid out on the conference room table. So what we had been using these conference rooms for, we're not anymore. We're using for a different purpose, but still important. But it sort of makes you sort of reevaluate the utility of having a big space. and where people actually have to be when they're working. And so we have room to accommodate our entire team in our Cary office, but we rarely need all of them here because most of them can work from home, and they do, especially right now because some of our team members have kids, and Wake County and all schools in North Carolina are closed right now. So it's hard to find daycare. It's hard to find accommodations to make sure that our team is able to come into the office if they need to. They're obviously not going to leave their kids at home, right? So we're trying to press as much as we can for the flexibility of working wherever is needed and whenever is possible, and being incredibly flexible with that. But things that we previously hadn't done, like Zoom meetings for initial strategy meetings, we're doing all the time now. Expedited signing meetings with zero contact, we're doing all the time now. Webinars, we're doing all the time now, right? And that's sort of, I think the blessing that, when it comes to our firm, is that this new reality had really pushed innovation in our practice that we probably should have already been doing or had already been offering or would have made a lot of sense. Now we're doing it just because it's required, but since we're already doing it, we're probably just going to keep it. It makes sense, right? And so we've, taken numerous steps, not just in the way that we effectuate planning and meet with clients, but also, what we're offering, right? We used to offer what we would call, 2 levels of planning. One is more so, relationship oriented, long-term client service, ongoing meetings every 3 years, that kind of thing. It's what we call our client service plan. It's very high touch, very relationship centric, with a lot of ongoing check-ins and that kind of thing to make sure that things are always going okay. And if not, that you have the audience to discuss those issues and see if planning needs to change to accommodate. And then we also have a platform called Plan Well, right? So shocker, this podcast is called Plan Well. Plan Well is basically our same exact planning solutions without our client service plan for a third of the cost, or for a reduction of 1/3 in the cost. And so we decided now in COVID, we're going to be pushing forward with more of a even further streamlined planning proposition that we call Quick Wills. And so Quick Wills is essentially supposed to be our answer to something like LegalZoom. So you're able to, get high quality legal documents that are prepared by a North Carolina lawyer that are unique to your circumstances, that are digitally delivered. So it's the same sort of mechanism that you would get from traditional do-it-yourself planning, but way higher level quality with implementation instruction and the specifics that is drafted according to North Carolina law. So much higher quality than what you would get, just sort of finding a template online. And that's largely because we saw such a high demand for planning. The sense of urgency was through the roof, that, everybody at that point was very concerned about, okay, do I have a plan in place? Do I need to do planning? I don't really have the budget for that, but I still need planning. So we want to basically be accessible to anybody regardless of their budget. And so we now have 3 planning propositions that are all over the board when it comes to fee tolerance and that kind of thing, and what value we're providing. So we'll continue to offer that. That just makes sense, and that's just because that's the way that the market is. That's the way that demand is. There isn't a one-size-fits-all planning proposition, and so when a firm basically says it's my way or the highway, it's incredibly insensitive to the needs of the public, but it's also an indication that you're incredibly inflexible, and that your processes are built around what makes you happy or what makes you comfortable, or the fees that you're charging rather than what's in the client's best interest. So we've got 3 very solid options that are totally up to the client to pick. And so in that respect, it almost looks like, like a Lexus versus Toyota distinction. Like, both are solid cars. Like, you're not going to get left on the side of the road when we're, talking about the quality of either of those cars. But some people just want a Lexus. Some people want that higher level of touch, that, deluxe or premium, type offering. And so we have a pretty similar, mindset when it comes to our planning propositions, traditional versus plan well. And obviously Quick Wills is just a better way to get, solid estate planning done for people who have a lower budget, south of $1,000, right? And so the right answer for that, there isn't one, right? It's based on whatever the client wants to do. And so we will continue to implement these types of tools and strategies that are new for us because of COVID, but will be with us forever, I think. There's no reason not to. So that is essentially, the new reality for us. Now, to pivot back to this legislative piece that we started the podcast with, there's currently a bill or in front of, or they'll be considering it today, the North Carolina legislature, which would allow for emergency video notary and emergency video witnessing to allow for not a true electronic signing of a will, but a will that is signed where the formalities are conducted over video. So live video conference. So the bill that's being considered is really only for times where we're in a state of emergency, and it's obviously it hasn't passed. It's still a bill. But so the draft legislation is basically saying during this state of emergency, not just during the stay-home order, but during the state of emergency, you would be able to execute a will from your home, for instance, as long as somebody like me, as a notary, and somebody like, two independent witnesses, probably two people from our staff, if we're doing it, can in real time witness you putting pen to paper, and that we're on video watching the entire thing and also signing to that, right? Attesting to your signature and then notarizing your signature. And so this would allow a fully, not fully digital, because it's not like DocuSign, you can't use electronic signature, but the formalities of it become digital in terms of the presence needed in order to conduct a normal will execution. And so this could be done for a last will and testament. It could be done for a financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, trust, HIPAA authorization, deed, whatever sort of document that would normally be found in an estate plan could then be witnessed and notarized over video, as long as it's done in real time. And as long as you can actually physically see the signature being done. So like right now, you can't see my desk. I'd have to reposition the camera to be able to actually point onto not just me, but me putting pen to paper and making my signature if I was the testator creating a will in this mechanism. So what this actually will look like, we don't know, because nothing's passed. It's being considered, but it will be substantially beneficial as long as it's tenable, right? As long as they do a right job or a good job with the bill. No one ever, assumes that laws are going to be reasonable and rational, but we hope that they will be. And we hope the legislature will listen to the estate planning section of the Bar Association and, get the input from the professionals that are actually conducting these sorts of signings and the realities of the logistics and that sort of thing, to make sure it's an actual usable bill. The reason why this step is needed versus an executive order, like what other states have done, is because North Carolina's will and power of attorney execution formalities are set out by statute, and that statute is passed by our legislature, right? So in North Carolina, Governor Cooper does not have legal authority, or likely does not have legal authority. It's obviously hasn't been challenged yet or been taken up by North Carolina appeals courts, but likely does not have the authority to, by executive order, change statutory provisions that don't fall within the executive function. And so when it comes to will execution formalities rather, that's not within Governor Cooper's authority to just change that by the stroke of a pen. So that's why we've had to wait until April 28th, which is when short session resumes in the North Carolina legislature, in order for this to even be a possibility. So while we're seeing it in other states, that's great. It just doesn't apply to us. It may be that in those states, the executive order is sufficient. It's not here, or likely wouldn't be here. So that's why things have waited, at least to this point, to be enacted via statute. Hopefully that goes through. And if it does, we should have some substantial guidance this week as to what signings can look like for our clients and for North Carolina citizens until this emergency or state of emergency has expired. What I hope is that they will make some meaningful changes to the statute generally to allow for these sorts of circumstances in any state of emergency. I'm not going to say that they should just generally allow for a perpetual, e-signings or electronic, witnessing of signings, because that may be a little bit overboard. But certainly in any state of emergency, whether it's a hurricane or a pandemic like this, or something of equivalent significance, there should be the ability to allow for these more flexible emergency provisions for end of life planning, for estate planning, for powers of attorney. Right? These are not uncommon strategies, and there's certainly things that are very needed in this time. Right? Very crucial to the protection of our citizens. So, with that said, we have to kind of wait and see, and hopefully by the time this episode is published, maybe something will have happened. I'm hoping something happens today, but that's just sort of where we're at. So that's the current state of things for estate planning in this new reality that we're in. I mentioned earlier we're still doing signings. That's something that we've been doing. We started last Monday, the 21st. The 20th. And then we did another round of signings yesterday, Monday. And we've done, I think, 11 or 12 each day. And so the big thing is, we're being incredibly safe, right? So all of our team has, face masks, right? We want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and then protecting our clients from any potential exposure that we could contribute. We also are, if any of our clients come in without a mask, or if they have a mask that's really, handmade and insufficient, we ended up getting a run of KN95 masks from a local business to help support our clients who don't have protection. Now that things are sort of looking like we're going to have, more mandatory use of masks, it's important that our clients are protected too. And so any clients who are coming in who don't have a mask or don't have a mask that's sufficiently protecting them, we're giving them, KN95 masks. Certainly our entire team has masks. All of our families have masks. We're protected, but we also have a substantial amount of hand sanitizer. We have a substantial amount of Lysol wipes. So we're disinfecting everything. We're allowing clients, or we're kind of forcing clients to take their pens with them, right? We have a bunch of Cary Estate planning pens. I don't have any in front of me right now. But they're, sanitized ahead of time, and then the client takes them with them. We wipe down everything that's been, touched by any of us during every single signing. So the tables are being wiped down, the doors, the doorknobs, everything is being wiped down, because we want to be overly cautious when it comes to protecting our clients. And we know, that most of the clients that are coming in to sign right now are at risk, are part of a vulnerable population, whether they're elderly or immunocompromised. A couple of our clients have been pregnant or have recently had a baby. And so people are just sort of, heightened level of protection when it comes to interactions. You probably see that at grocery stores right now. Most people have masks on, and that's great, right? We want to be proactive in protection, but so we are really going above and beyond what would even be reasonable steps to make sure that our clients are not being unnecessarily exposed to infection, but still allowing for our clients to have that peace of mind that their planning is getting done. And I think that's a key point here, is that I think initially a lot of us had paralysis when it came to, what should we be doing for our clients to help, implement signings. And before we really knew what this looked like, our policy, and the policy for a lot of estate planning lawyers, was to just stop doing signings until things return to normal, or to send documents to clients for them to conduct their own signings. And what we then sort of found is that this was going to take a little bit longer than we realized, right? The executive order is likely going to be extended. It did get extended. But also that when the more people got PPE for themselves, masks, and they were social distancing and staying home, the more control we kind of had over the situation, the more we could reevaluate our processes to be able to implement something that was going to be protective first and foremost, but allow for our clients to do planning and actually get their documents signed, valid, in place as soon as possible, right? So when we have these signing meetings, every single one of our clients has been incredibly grateful, incredibly thankful that we've been able to help them during this terrible time, and that's why we do this, right? It's not for the money. It's not to try to create some semblance of personal success. It's the peace of mind. It's the what I call the deep breath, right? When people let that out, right? The burden is lifted off their shoulders as soon as they've got that packaged estate plan in their hand, everything signed, witnessed, notarized, and good to go. And so we can maintain that normalcy for them in a protective way that's still efficient, that's still approachable, it's not intimidating, and it's still effective even right now. So our timeline for drafting, for signing, it's the same. It's the same as it's always been. And that's because we've just pivoted into new methods. But our overall mission is the exact same. And our overall methods are largely the same. We've just changed the logistics of the personal contact aspect. Still operating as normal though, right? Still happy to help anybody who wants to do planning, whatever their preference looks like, whatever their budget can support, whatever their ideal outcome should look like, we can do that. And we're very accessible, certainly right now, because we're just a video call away. But even when we come back to some semblance of normalcy where we're meeting in our offices again, we've got 3 offices: Cary, Raleigh, Wake Forest. Pretty much anywhere in Wake County, you can get to us within about 10 miles. And so what that looks like for you is totally up to you. What that looks like for your clients, if you have clients that are in need, it's totally up to them. But we're here, we're ready to help, we're ready to act, and we're ready to make things as easy as possible and still be very protective of our client safety. That's it for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. This is obviously episode 1, so we're going to be working out some kinks and improving and pivoting and probably layering in more interviews and things like that. But given where we're at today, we felt that episode 1 of the Plan Well podcast, we would provide the most value if we could just kind of give you a rundown of where we're at, what's going on with COVID, how are we still conducting business, and what will that look like in the future. If you like this episode, obviously subscribe on our YouTube channel or subscribe on any podcast servers that you utilize, like Apple podcast app, SoundCloud, all these different podcast apps. We should be publishing regularly, so look out for more episodes. This is Paul from Cary Estate Planning with the Plan Well podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Plan Well podcast. We will see you next time.